Good evening, everybody. Here we are. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us for what I know is going to be an important and enlightening conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nina Tassler, and I'm the chair of the Jewish Family Service LA Board of Directors. Tonight, we're going to hear from three incredible individuals. First, we'll hear from Eli Weitzer, President and CEO of Jewish Family Service LA. Next will be Rabbi Elliot Dorff, who will speak to us about Jewish and psychological insights into coping with the pandemic. And then we will hear from Dr. Margaret Avenaire, who is the Senior Director of Integrated Clinical Services and Quality Management at Jewish Family Service LA. I really can't think of three more qualified people to speak on this issue, which I know is at the forefront of all of our lives right now. We'll have time for questions at the end of the program. And at any time during the program, you can send me your questions by typing them into the chat box. You can send them to me directly or post them in the group chat. When all three of our speakers are through, I'll go through as many questions, as many of the submitted questions as possible. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce JFS President and CEO, Eli Weitzer.
Thank you, Nina. Welcome, everybody. It's really wonderful to see everybody here tonight. And thank you to Rabbi Dorff and to Peggy Avenaire also. So when I think back over the last 9 months here at JFS, I think about how so many times the situations that we're dealing with have gotten worse and worse. Whether it was the duration or the intensity of COVID, or the social and political turmoil, or staff and clients really stretched to their limits. But I've also seen something remarkable. At the same time, our ability to navigate, to flex, and to respond has grown. While we keep being challenged to dig deeper, we have been able to. This has been a time of enormous challenge and also of enormous resiliency, creativity, and caring. I can share some numbers over the last many months. We're fielding about 800 calls a month to our domestic violence crisis lines, 2,000 calls monthly to our senior centers, and 800 calls to our central access intake line. We've provided over 500 emergency financial assistance grants, totaling well over $300,000. We're currently providing home-delivered meals to over 1,000 older adults and disabled individuals, and groceries through our Silver program to over 5,700 individuals each month. Over 400 individuals are receiving mental health services. Over 2,500 seniors are receiving regular case management services. Our 3 domestic violence shelters have remained open and full throughout. How have we responded to the emergent needs? We doubled our production capacity at our Hirsch Kosher Kitchen, preparing home-delivered meals. Temporarily, we added a second shift. We're now providing a delivery option for SOVA and delivering groceries to over 1,300 seniors and individuals with disabilities so that they don't have to come to the pantry. We seamlessly transition services across the agency to telephonic or video platforms, intake, case management, therapy, classes, and activities. We expanded classes and activities, and we opened up new counseling groups, providing access to more people in need of connection and services. We implemented strict COVID protocols at our shelters to ensure continued safe operations, and we've been able to keep all 3 shelters open. What I've learned is we have the most incredible staff working at JFS. We have the most incredible management team working at JFS. And we have a community of supporters who recognize the importance of the work we're doing. We don't feel alone in this work. And as you'll hear more about tonight, that sense of connection with others empowers us to keep doing the work that we are doing. Thank you for joining us in this work, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Eli. It is now my honor to introduce Rabbi Elliot Dorff. Rabbi Dorff is a visiting professor of law at the UCLA School of Law and is Distinguished Professor of Jewish Philosophy at the American Jewish University. He is an expert in the philosophy of conservative Judaism bioethics, and acknowledged within the conservative community as an expert decisor of Jewish law. Rabbi Dorff is the chairman of the Rabbinical Assembly's Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, and has written many responses on various aspects of Jewish law. And we can add to this very summarized list of all of Rabbi Dorff's many accomplishments that he is also a past chair of the JFS Board of Directors. We are so thrilled to have you with us tonight, Rabbi Dorff. Thank you.
Hello there. Am I on? Yes. Okay. Okay. So what I thought I would do is something very philosophical, but I'm going to try to make this very concrete, because when we're facing all of the pressures that we are facing with COVID, one of the things that I think the Jewish tradition can help us with is a really very different understanding of ourselves than what we get in our American tradition. We American Jews really inherit both of those traditions, and we like to think of them as being the same in many ways and reinforcing each other, and in many ways they are. But in some ways that are really critical to helping ourselves and helping everybody else manage and cope with the COVID crisis, the Jewish tradition is really very different from the American tradition, and I think can be very helpful. Now, some of those ways I described in the rabbinic ruling that was sent out together with this session. But I'm not going to assume that everybody did their homework. I've been a professor too long for that. So what I'm going to do is sort of summarize some of the things that I said in that article, and you can have at leisure read it when you want, and then I'm going to add one or two things. So first of all, in the American tradition, I own my own body. This goes back to the Nancy Cruzan decision of the US Supreme Court in 1990. So as an adult, I can refuse any kind of medical intervention. I cannot demand any kind of medical intervention. That I do not have the right to do, but I can refuse anything because I own my body. So that means that in the American tradition, whatever I do with myself, as long as I don't hurt anyone else, or violate a law that would, in fact, hurt somebody else, as long as I do that, I can do whatever I want. Well, here's my Achilles heel already, just a few minutes into this. If I wanted to, I could eat a half a gallon of ice cream every night of the week. And if I'm doing it, it might as well be mint chocolate chip. It is so good. Or cherry Garcia, oh God. Anyway, but it would not be a good idea for me to eat a half a gallon of ice cream every night of the week, because I will gain 500 pounds in no time. Now, in the American tradition, that would be an unwise thing to do, right? I won't be able to move around very well. I won't be able to do my job very well. I won't be able to interact with others very well. All kinds of, my health insurance will go off the roof, right? I mean, my costs will go off the roof. So all kinds of pragmatic reasons why I should not do that. But in the end, there's no law that says that I may not. But in the Jewish tradition, I don't own my body. God does. There are three partners, according to the Talmud, in the creation of each one of us: man, father, mother, and God. But unlike your father and mother, God owns your body throughout your lifetime. And we have our body in a fiduciary relationship with God. In other words, we have our body on trust. God trusts us to take care of ourselves. And so consequently, I owe it to God to do what I can to maintain myself in good health. And as we'll see in just a moment, that includes good mental health as well as physical health. It's as if you were renting an apartment. You would have fair use of your apartment during your lease. And in the same way, you have fair use of your body during your lease on life. But you don't have the right to destroy the apartment. And you don't even have the right to harm it. You have to take reasonable care of that apartment. So in the same sort of a way, in the Jewish tradition, we actually have a duty to God to take care of ourselves. It's not just for pragmatic reasons, which I can uphold or ignore at will. I really have a duty to take care of myself. The second way in which I think it's really important to second lesson of the Jewish tradition that's really important for us now is that in the Jewish tradition, our mind, our body, our emotions, and our will are all integrated within us, and they affect each other. And now you might say to yourself, well, isn't that obvious? Well, as a matter of fact, in the Western philosophical tradition, starting with Plato, there is a very strong dichotomy between mind and body, right? The mind in Plato is the distinctly human in us. The body is the animal in us. We are rational animals. And as a matter of fact, one of the stock issues in Western philosophy is, well, if the mind and the body are so separate from us, so separate, then how are they at all connected? Descartes thought that they were connected in the pineal gland. It's a gland in your head. And to this day, one of the issues in Western thought is, if the mind and the body are so separate, then how are they at all connected? And that, by the way, leads to all kinds of things in regard to medicine. Until very recently in American medicine, when doctors were trained, they were trained to deal with the body. And the person that the doctor is administering medical help to was completely absent. It was only really I was actually on a committee at UCLA Medical School in the 1990s. It was 4 Jewish physicians, as it happens, and we created this program called doctoring. Which is now required, ever since it's been required of every medical student at UCLA Medical School, which deals with all of the non-physical aspects of medical care. The anthropology of medicine, the sociology of medicine, the economics of medicine, the religious issues and ethical issues. So for example, the first case, it's a series of cases. And because it's in Southern California, in the first 2 years of medical school, these cases are acted out by professional actors, actually. So the first case is a woman, a 15-year-old woman comes into your office, complains of stomach problems. You examine her, and you find out that she has no stomach problems whatsoever. She's just pregnant. Now, it would be better medically if she were 18, but if she's 15 and otherwise in good health, she'll probably be okay. But she is Catholic and Hispanic and unmarried. So everything that happens in terms of her medical care will be a function of those aspects of her life. And one needs to understand that, and it's something that's really important for doctors to be able to understand, that is the case. And even if they're not the ones that deal with all of those aspects, they need to be aware of them just simply for the physical care of this woman and her fetus. In the Jewish tradition, it goes back to a story in the Talmud that I talk about in the paper. From the very beginning, the understanding was that our mind, our body, and our emotions are all integrated within us. So the way we feel about ourselves, the way we think about ourselves, is going to have a major effect on how we treat our body, and how we treat our body is going to have a major effect on how we think about ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. And it's not just ourselves. The American tradition is very individualistic. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So as an American, I'm an individual with rights, right? The central Jewish story is Exodus Sinai. We leave Egypt not as individuals, we leave as a community. And when we get to Sinai, we don't get a single right. We get 613 commandments. This is the beginning of Jewish guilt. Although I must say I do a lot of interfaith work, and the Catholics think we know nothing about guilt. They have guilt cornered, okay? But in any case, the idea here is that we are members of a community with duties, as opposed to being individuals with rights. Now, sometimes rights and duties are reciprocal. If you have a right to your property, I have a duty not to steal it. Okay, if you have a right to your life, I have a duty not to murder you. But very often rights and duties are not reciprocal. And in any case, if I get up in the morning and I'm an individual with rights, then the world owes me. But if I get up in the morning and I'm a member of a community with duties, then I owe the world. And what that then leads to is a very different understanding of what I need to do in the world. I need to get up and do something in this life in order to try to help other people, right? That's a very different understanding of myself than I'm an individual and the world owes me. And then the other piece of this is that I am, in a Jewish understanding of things, not an individual with rights. I'm a member of a community, a family and a community. And I have duties to all those people, right? So I need to get out of myself and I need to serve other people. Now, why is that important? That's important because in terms of this COVID stuff, because one of the things that the Jewish tradition would say to us is that we really need to get out of ourselves and begin to try to serve others. And we will, and when we do that, that's going to be something really important for our own health, for our own ability to deal with ourselves. This particular little poem that I saw once is anonymous, and I've actually tried to find the owner, the author of it, but to no avail. I sought my God, I could not see. I sought myself eluded me. I sought my brother, and I found all three. Right? It's a simple poem, but basically it's very Buberian, Martin Buber. It's very in that way, right? But the basic idea is that in interacting with others, we begin to find a purpose for our own lives, and we begin to forget about some of whatever the issues are in our own lives, and begin to be able to serve others and be, frankly, much happier ourselves. Now, how is it that we get to be happier? And here I want to bring in a Hanukkah lesson, and then I'll stop and let the rest of the program go on. In the liturgy for Hanukkah, it starts out al hanisim, on the miracles and on the acts of bravery and the acts of might. We need to thank God, and then there's the story that's told is the story that you're familiar with about how the Maccabees overcame the Syrian Greeks, despite the fact that they were a small people and the Greeks were large people and very powerful. And so that's the story in the book of Maccabees. That's sort of repeated in the Al-Nisim story. However, there's a piece of it that's not in the book of Maccabees. In the book of Maccabees, it's the might of the Maccabees that overcame the Greeks, right? In Al-Nisim, it's God who helped the Maccabees overcome the Greeks. And the other story that you're familiar with in regard to Hanukkah is the one that's in the Talmud. When they finally did overcome the Greeks and they tried to rededicate the temple, there was only enough oil for one day, but it lasted 8. And that's the other miracle of Hanukkah, right? But that's the sense of miracle that means something unexpected, maybe even against the order of nature. But right before Al Hanisim in the prayer book is a prayer that we say 3 times a day as Jews throughout the year, right? It's Modim Anachnu Lach. We need to thank you, God. Among the things are for our lives that are in your hands, and for your miracles that are with us each day. Now, a miracle each day is not an interruption in nature. It's the opposite of that. It's the fact that we need to recognize that the things that we have, the things that our bodies work to the extent that they work, that we are able to breathe the air if we don't foul it up, that many of us do have food to eat, and those who don't get help from JFS, right? That we are able to interact with other people. And I think one of the things that the Jewish tradition teaches us is according to the Talmud, we're supposed to say 100 blessings every day. We have to get up in the morning and thank God for the fact that we're alive. Some of you will remember Rabbi Richard Levy, Alav Shalom, who was when I first got here, he was the Hillel director at UCLA, and then he became the regional Hillel director, and then he was the dean of the rabbinical school at HUC. He once gave a talk to our rabbinical students at American Jewish University, which I will never forget. He said that he was a night person. But when he got up in the morning, he was in a bad mood. But the liturgy required him to say, Modeh ani lefanecha, I am thankful to you, O God, for restoring me in life, right? And it completely changed his mood. And if you do 100 blessings each day, right, that means that you take the mundane and you make it something special. You make it, you express gratitude for it. And we have a lot of evidence that adults who are grateful for the things in their lives are much happier people. And by the way, I have the same thing with children. A lot of evidence that both adults and children who are grateful for the little things in their lives, right, tend to be much happier people. So I think several things come out of this for us now. Number one, that we need to reach out and maybe not touch someone during COVID, but reach out and create relationships with people. We may love our family, but we may not want to deal with them 24/7. We have to recognize that. Each of us needs some time alone, and each of us needs some time with other people, right? Because we are members not only of our family, but of our community and of the larger human community. And we need to recognize that, which is deeply ingrained in the Jewish tradition. Do not separate yourself from the community, Hillel says, right? We are responsible for each other. The Talmud tells us, right? We are part of a community. That's one thing that's really important for us. Number two, we need to do what we can in order to improve this world. We have duties to others. Number three, we should be grateful for the little things in our lives and express that gratitude. And that in and of itself will make us happier, and it will enable us to reach out and help other people. I think these kinds of lessons that our tradition can teach us, very different from an American understanding of who we are and what we need to do in life, right? That these lessons from the Jewish tradition can really help us cope with what is a pandemic, on a strictly physical point of view, but is also from a mental point of view, from a psychological point of view, a real downer. But I think what the tradition wants to tell us is that there is much in our lives that we need to be grateful for, and we simply have to find those things and express our gratitude for them. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Rabbi Dorff. I thank you so much. That was truly extraordinary, and we thank you for the incredibly thought-provoking presentation. I know many of you are going to have questions, so just a reminder, you can put them in the chat, send them to me directly or in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the program, but that was extraordinary. I now have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Margaret Avenaire, Senior Director of Integrated Clinical Services and Quality Management at JFS. Peggy. Do we have Peggy? I think.
Here.
There she is.
Yes, good evening. I had to be unmuted in order to speak with you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm going to speak a bit about mental health during the pandemic and specifically about JFS and what we're doing. As Rabbi Dorff highlighted so eloquently, the nurturance and maintenance of mind, body, spirit, family, and community are central to Jewish tradition. These principles are also important influences in the modern field of mental health. Our field today has come a long way from the linear cause and effect view that personal experiences and family dynamics are the primary influences on our mental health and well-being. Today, most mental health professionals understand that we are products of complex systems. We inhabit an ecosystem that includes societal, familial, global, personal, and biological factors. In family systems therapy, we define healthy families and individuals as those that demonstrate flexibility and are less resistant to change. When our equilibrium and the certainty that we have at least some control over our lives is disrupted, as it is right now, mental health is inevitably impacted. How we respond is key to mental and overall wellness. Whether we live in extreme poverty or in better circumstances, a sense of well-being is inextricably connected to our ability to feel influential in our own lives, to be able to harness personal strengths, to exercise at least some control over our relationships, our future, and our destiny. Therefore, it goes without saying that stability and mood are under attack when we lose control over our lives. For so many, the possibility of controlling anything in life is elusive. In addition, this pandemic has required us to isolate and distance ourselves from loved ones, friends, and community. And so the potential for mental anguish increases exponentially. As human beings, we naturally seek connection, purpose, and ultimately meaning in our lives. And when our destiny seems to be in the hands of others, it is understandable that we might feel anxious and depressed. Moods may shift daily, sometimes hourly, at least in my case. To acknowledge our own humanity and the fragility of the psyche is a kindness we should nurture in ourselves and in others. This is one important step toward mitigating distress. We hear a lot about self-care. I suggest that this should include self-monitoring in order to identify when symptoms are affecting daily functioning or the well-being of others. For many of us, effective self-care may also include caring for others. We must be vigilant to focus on the present moment, to be careful not to overload ourselves with too much information and too little self-awareness. For some individuals, being alone does not always equate with loneliness. There are many ways to alleviate loneliness, as the rabbi noted, particularly now through virtual and telephonic connection. For some unique and inspired individuals, creativity thrives when choices become more limited. Perhaps we can learn something from them too. Striking a balance between being fully present in the moment and holding hope for the future is the challenge we all face together. One thing we know for sure, the pandemic has underscored both the commonalities and the differences among us. As we all struggle to adjust to living with the unknown in a world beyond our control, we can at times feel estranged from our former selves and from one another. Ideally, this common condition can also serve to bring us closer together as empathic members of the human race. Feeling unstable, anxious, or even depressed is a normal response to these abnormal circumstances. However, when this state of mind interferes with our daily lives or relationships, it may become a clinical emergency. When this happens, we need help. Even before this happens, we need each other. As Rabbi Dorff noted, there is no shame in seeking assistance and support. I did read his article. Likewise, there is deep satisfaction when offering help to someone else. In the award-winning children's book, hopefully you've read it, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, the boy asks the horse, "What is the bravest thing you've ever said?" The horse answers, "Help." At JFS, our approach to mental health treatment is rooted in these principles. In our biopsychosocial assessment prior to treatment, we assume that clients of all ages and backgrounds may have experienced trauma in the past and overcome other losses and challenges in their lives. We hope to support their resilience while providing, in many cases, concrete assistance. We know that if you have no place to live or food to eat, your mind, body, and spirit will be impacted. We begin where the client is, not where we think they should be. During the pandemic, many individuals with painful pasts are triggered to relive their trauma and require an approach that acknowledges and validates that history. We work from a recovery model approach, one that is driven by the belief that recovery is possible and that mental health is on a continuum with hope and resilience at its center. Over the past 8 months, in addition to our longstanding work with older adults, we have seen increasing numbers of younger individuals and families seeking treatment at JFS. Other populations, such as elderly men who might not have reached out to us in the past, are seeking support. We view this as a positive trend. The availability of telehealth platforms has increased accessibility for many older adults and others who would not have been able to attend sessions in person. The number of groups we are offering at JFS has grown as well, providing a welcome opportunity for socialization and connection. I would be remiss if I did not highlight the resilience of our incredible staff. They too are living through this stressful time with their families and other pressures. Our social workers and clinicians provide frontline mental health services for people in unimaginable circumstances. JFS works hard to respond to the needs of these essential workers as well. In many ways, the pandemic has reminded us of the basic need of every human being on earth for support and compassion. If we hope to survive this crisis together, reducing the stigma of mental illness, supporting mental wellness, and encouraging the brave act of asking for help must be central to our efforts. The great philosopher, thinker, and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, was himself an example of the capacity to endure and find meaning under the worst of conditions in a concentration camp. He observed, "A man's concern, even his despair over the worthwhileness of life, is an existential distress, but by no means a mental disease." Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Avenaire. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm now going to share some questions with the panelists, and I will go in the order in which they were received. An extraordinary program, and the first question I have is directed to Rabbi Dorff. How to balance what we, the Jewish believer, have as our lens community with the American individual rights lens?
With difficulty, okay. And truthfully, let me just say, I'm a very proud American as well as being a very proud Jew, right? So I mean, I think the American environment, the country, and the ideology on which it is based has enabled Jews to do things that they have not been able to do, that we have not been able to do for generations, actually for hundreds of years in most other places. And there are some really important pieces of the American tradition that add to my life as a Jew. I mean, a notion of individual liberty, a notion, American pragmatism, the idea that, the can-do kind of piece of the American tradition, and the notion that we need to find pragmatic fixes for a lot of issues, and not just bewail our inability not to deal with them. And so, I mean, it's those pieces of it, and the pluralism of America. The United States is the most pluralistic country that has ever existed on the face of the earth. I don't know if you saw this, but in the Los Angeles Times about a year ago, they did a study of the students at Hollywood High School, and they found 90 different native languages among the students of Hollywood High School, right? I mean, unbelievable. I mean, we are the new Ellis Island on the West Coast, right? And just simply the fact that we're all part of the same country, is just amazing. Now, granted that there are, not everything is smooth, and there is, one of the programs that the board had earlier, I think late, and it was in August, when we talked about structural racism in our country that we really have to confront. in the delivery of mental health care as well as physical health care. And of course, there was a lot of anti-Semitism in this country in the 1920s and 30s into the 1940s, and it rears its head every once in a while again. I mean, it's not as if everything is wonderful, right? But the fact of the matter is still that in most other countries, I mean, just look at what's going on in France these days, what's going on in Germany these days with the Muslim, immigrants, or what's going on in Sri Lanka and in Thailand with the Rohingya, people that are fleeing that country. For better or for worse, we are an amazingly pluralistic country, and I'm really proud of that, because my Jewish roots say that every person is created in the image of God, and I have to respect that in every person. More than that, I can learn from other people's cultures to enrich my own. And the Jewish tradition itself is not something that just sort of lived in its own Platonic realm for all of its life. I mean, a lot of Jewish in the Talmud itself, and a lot of the commercial law and a lot of the marital law that's in the Talmud was borrowing from Greek and Roman law. A lot of the things that we do in terms of creating our lives as American Jews are, it's a synthesis of who we are as Americans and who we are as Jews. But exactly how we do that in every generation is not easy. That's why I meant it seriously, even though I was a little bit facetious when I said at the beginning, not easily, right? And there are real tensions between, the American side of us and the Jewish side of us on some issues. On other issues, they are mutually reinforcing. The sense that, well, I'm an individual with rights as an American. I have to be respected as such. I'm an individual created in the image of God in the Jewish tradition, and I have to be respected as such. That doesn't mean I have to like everybody. It certainly doesn't mean that I have to approve what everybody does, right? But there has to be an initial respect for each person. Both traditions are very much committed to law as the way in which the society is going to regulate itself. It's not going to be in the hands of some dictator that rules by fiat. We're going to figure out how we're going to live with each other through law. That's another fundamental conviction of both traditions. Both traditions have a very strong sense of the importance of culture, of music, right? Of dance, of literature, of all, even philosophy, right? So I mean, there are a lot of ways in which our two traditions really reinforce each other, but there are ways in which they do differ from each other, and a lot of those ways are very much in play when we talk about how do we deal with mental health issues during COVID. So that's why I was I was emphasizing those distinctions as opposed to the commonalities in the traditions that we inherit.
Thank you, Rabbi. We have another question. Daily life, I think this is for Peggy and the Rabbi. Daily life can now seem less familiar and more frightening. What do you think are some of those what do you think some of the first steps out will look like? And what can we do to prepare ourselves for venturing out into our community? How do we reestablish ourselves in whatever the new reality is going to look like?
Why don't you start, Peggy?
Well, small question, obviously. I can't say that I have a good answer for that. I think partly what I was highlighting in my remarks is, on the one hand, the commonalities among us in terms of how we cope and how we move forward. And on the other hand, the differences, the distinctions. I think for me, the idea of being, knowing yourself and understanding what your level of tolerance is as we move forward. If you're someone who needs a lot of assurance that you're on sure ground, you may take one approach. And if you are moving into the world with a different kind of spirit and a different kind of focus, you might be more likely to be one of the first. I can't say that that there is certainly one recipe for all. I think this is so uncharted for us all. I think listening to each other, talking this through, I think this kind of a forum where we have an opportunity to think together about this bizarre circumstance we find ourselves in is one step in the right direction to figuring out what next steps can possibly look like. Honestly, hopefully we all come through it with our faculties intact and our clear-headedness and our spirit of connection, and then we can figure it out together.
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, I mean, frankly, the very first line that came to mind when you asked the question, Nina, was a line from the prophet Amos, Lo navi anochi velo ben navi. I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet. I'm the son of an engineer. Okay.
Well said.
Who was a wonderful man, but he was not a prophet. But I mean, getting serious now, I mean, along the lines that Peggy was just talking about, both on an individual level and on a communal level, we are all grappling with what's going to happen after this is over. I mean, it seems to me that one of the things that we're really learning from this is the degree to which we really want to be with each other and be with other people. You know, some of the things that we've been able to do. I mean, in some ways, thank God for Zoom, because without Zoom, we couldn't have this meeting. I couldn't teach all my classes. I mean, all kinds of things would be really terrible. On the other hand, you can't sing together with Zoom. You can't hug each other on Zoom. You can't share a kiddush after the services on Shabbos, right? With Zoom, you just can't do any of those things, right? So, I mean, I think a lot of the things that we've learned through this process is exactly how much we really need and cherish a number of the ways in which we come together and are indeed social animals, right? Are indeed, as Aristotle said a long time ago, right? That we are indeed people who need each other. You know, Genesis chapter 2, it's not good for a person to be alone, right? Or another ancient Jewish source, people who need people are the luckiest people in the world, right?
Well, she was Jewish.
So we are seeing this in spades. On the other hand, I mean, what we are also seeing is that some things that we thought we used to have to be together for, we don't have to be together for. So I mean, I think a lot of businesses are finding out that some of the meetings that they're having, they can have on Zoom. They don't have to fly people to the same place and put them up in a hotel and all of that kind of thing, right? I think, frankly, the airlines and the hotel business are going to suffer as a result of this, because businesses are finding out that they can do certain things online, that maybe not everything, not where the business has to sort of figure out a new direction that they want to take. That probably is going to require an in-person meeting. But you know, if they're just checking in with each other, that might be done on Zoom. Some classes, I mean, one of the things that American Jewish University has found out is that our ability to give classes, continuing education classes to people has just exploded on Zoom, right? Because people don't have to deal with the 405 freeway or the 101, right? And they can take advantage of all kinds of classes that they never would have attended if they had to go someplace, to do it. So, I mean, there are going to be some things I think that we're going to, and by the way, now a lot of these in medicine, a lot of these telemedicine appointments that you have with your doctor, right? My guess is they're going to continue on afterward. If it's not something that, if it's not something that you really need to be, to see a doctor for, but you can see a doctor this way. So, I mean, it's, I think there are going to be some things that we're going to continue on with that we've learned from this, but I mean, I think, despite Netflix, I really want to go with my wife to a movie, right? And I really want to go to the theater, okay, together, right? So, I mean, I think we're going to find out what worked really well this way and what was just, as soon as we can get back to the other way, we're going to try to do that. By the way, synagogues and rabbis are really worried about all of this. And, in terms of what kinds of things, because if you can attend, if you use electricity on Shabbat, and you can attend any service anywhere in the world on Shabbat, will you go to your home synagogue? Right? I think rabbis and synagogues are really worried about this. And I would just say to you that a synagogue is more than a performance. A synagogue is a community. And we really all need that very badly. So continue to, this is a rabbi talking, but continue to, be members of your synagogue and support them financially and in other ways.
Wonderful, thank you. I have another question. What should the ethical principles be in establishing the priorities? Whoops, hold on. There it is. Be in establishing the priorities in which the anti-COVID vaccine should be allocated within our society?
I guess that's for me, huh?
Yes, it is.
Well, if you saw the lead article actually in yesterday's New York Times, at least the print edition, I think on the online edition it was a day or two earlier. It was really a wonderful article about the various kinds of ethical principles that come into play in terms of trying to figure out who should get what when. This issue is in the ethical literature is called triage, right? How do you decide who gets what when you can't give everything to everybody? In the Jewish tradition, we faced that issue a long time ago, not in regard to medical care, because in regard to medical, I mean, our ancestors were really quite good at preventive care. I mean, Leviticus 13 and 14 already has quarantine, right? So our ancestors back to biblical times knew about stopping the spread of communicable diseases through quarantine. The rabbis already know that you should eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, not too much meat. You should exercise. The rabbis already knew that, okay? Back in the Talmud. But they were not good at all at curing medicine, at things like vaccines. But our ancestors did face the issue of allocating scarce resources in at least two areas, namely, what do you give to the poor, and how do you decide that? Because remember, our Jewish communities were not well off. It was very often poor communities giving to the destitute throughout our history. Yes, there were the Rothschilds and all of that. There was Donna Garcia. She was a rich woman who basically enabled Spanish Jews to move to Turkey after the Spanish Jews were exiled from Spain in 1492. There were some rich Jews in our history, but the vast majority of us were just making it, and we're trying to decide how to give to those who couldn't make it at all. And the other issue was in redemption from captivity, where Jewish communities had to decide what to give to people who were taken captive. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I wrote a book called Matters of Life and Death, A Jewish Approach to Modern Medical Ethics. And in the 12th chapter of that book, I talk about who gets what and who pays for what in regard to medical care. And you can sort of see how that works, or at least how the Jewish tradition would say how it works. The basic idea is you save as many people as you can. And so then the question is, well, how do you make that happen in this kind of pandemic? So I think the Jewish tradition would agree with most of what the CDC has said. The first people you want to save are the people on the front lines, so that they can then save others, right? But then the question is, well, who then after that? The people that are the most vulnerable, like elderly people in nursing homes, or people in prisons, right? Is that the next group? Or is it other people who are working in essential activities, whatever essential means here, and that's really up for grabs, right? And so, I mean, I think that kind of very serious moral analysis is exactly what we Americans are now engaged in and need to be engaged in. I think from a Jewish perspective, the basic idea is pikuach nefesh. You save as many people as you can.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rabbi. I think that about wraps it up. On behalf of everyone at Jewish Family Service, I want to thank Rabbi Dorff for sharing this incredible presentation with us. And a big thank you to Eli Weitzer and to Margaret, Dr. Margaret Avenaire, for always providing such important insight into the workings of this vital organization. When I finish talking in a moment, information about how you can contact or learn more about JFS will be on the screen. We're here to help our community. And so please share this information far and wide. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope to connect with you again very soon. Stay safe, take care of each other, and really thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you.
I know.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye all.
I'm Peggy's mother.